weeks ago? Okay, most of you did, right? So, you remember what was said about how your life holds value from the start, even before you were born? Right? So Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you." Before you were even a thought. Before you were ever even started being developed. That's crazy. Before time. Right? Genesis 1:27, God created man in his own image. Paul says in Galatians that he was set apart before he was even born. And then Psalm 139:16-17. "Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me when there was yet none of them." So before I was even born, before I had days, they were already there. "How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God, how great is the sum of them." If you guys have heard me talk before, I'm going to be using a lot of Bible verses because that's just what I do. So, there's another one. Crazy. Ephesians 2:10, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." So we are created for Christ, for good works, which were already prepared before time even began. God knew what he was going to do with us. So don't lose sight of the value God has placed on you. It is safe to say that God knew from the beginning that he was going to create us. Not only did he know he was going to create us, he knew how he was going to form us. He knew our gender. He knew how tall we were going to be. He knew how heavy we were going to be. He knew how everything you could possibly think. He knows our struggles. He knows our passions. He knows our likes. He knows our dislikes. He knows everything about you. He knows more about you than you know about yourself. Crazy is that? If you know anybody, it should be you, right? But God knows you better than you know yourself. So at a philosophical level, big words, it's easy to recognize that. But how many of you guys know that your day-to-day goings, comings and goings, that it's really easy to forget that? So, as a lot of you guys know, I was homeschooled growing up. Up until high school, I started going to school my freshman year. I was much smaller than I am now. I weighed like, shoot, what am I up to now? We'll call it 65 pounds less than I do now, roughly. So, I'm not that big right now, but I was much smaller. I think I was 5'5" my freshman year. We were all 3 inches in high school, so if you're short freshman year, it's going to go one of two ways. Either you're going to stay short, or you're going to get really tall, like some people. It's okay, I'm not jealous of you, right? It's fine. So, needless to say, I think I was one of the smallest guys in my high school at that time. When I graduated, I was 100% still the shortest guy in my high school. Go figure, right? And I was 5'8" when I graduated. How stupid is that? So, I digress. I was also really introverted and I didn't speak much, whether that's because I was too shy, because I was too small, and I just didn't, I didn't want to stick up for myself because that's just my personality. I was an easy target for bullying because of that. So how many of you guys have ever been bullied? Why is only like half the room raising their hands? Because half of you guys are lying, or you don't understand what bullying really is. Or we were homeschooled. What? Yes. See? Yeah, there it is. The whole family raises their hands. Yes. Siblings count. You can be bullied by anyone. So at first it seems like it could just be some hurtful words. It could be a push in the hall. It starts to wear you down, right? It wore me down. I began to think that I was helpless and worthless, that there must be something wrong with me that caused me to get picked on. My insecurities began to get the better of me. I began comparing myself to the people around me that didn't seem to be getting bullied, and it brought me to a series of conclusions. I'm not big enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm not smart enough. How many of you guys have siblings that are way smarter than you probably ever be? Right? Caroline's smarter than I am. She's way better at school than I am. I've got 3 older sisters. One of them was a runner-up to the valedictorian, one of them was a valedictorian. And then there was me struggling to get B's. Right? I wasn't allowed to play basketball if I had a C, so I struggled to get B's just so I could play sports. I'm not smart enough. How many of you guys have ever felt that way? I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. In math, and science, and English, some of us don't know how to speak to this day. So, how many of you guys have been told those things by other people? You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not fast enough. You can't play basketball on my team at the pickup, at the Y because you're just not good enough. I get that all the time. Like I'm short and white or something, so they don't pick me. Crazy. Also, I just suck at basketball now, so I don't blame them. So anyway, I began to tell myself that I'd never amount to anything, that I had any worth. I began to feel as though whenever I was around people, that I was a burden. I began to feel that everyone would be better off without me. And I fell into a state of depression that led to cutting and suicidal thoughts. My mental state had me believing things that simply were not true. I'm going to pause here. I'm telling you guys this because I want you to understand that although I, Dallas, Jessica, Caroline, any of your teachers, your parents, some of your older siblings, because I know that for some of you guys have siblings that are 10, 15 years older than you. Just because it seems like we might have all the answers, like we might have it all together, does not mean that we didn't get to that place because we didn't have a hard time getting there. It wasn't always some easy process. We all have a story, we all have a history, and we all have been through things that many of you guys will never hear about. So if you think that somebody out here in a position of leadership doesn't understand you or can't, or it's just not possible that they could possibly understand what you're feeling, you're wrong. There's somebody here that you can talk to about literally anything, and I promise you there's somebody in leadership in this church that knows what you're going through and knows how to talk to you. You just have to ask. I also want you to know that no matter what you're going through, no matter how big or small it is, that we care about you, we understand you, and we will do whatever we can to help you. That's why we're here. If we didn't care about you, we would not be here. I promise you, I would not be standing up here if I didn't care about every single one of you. I cannot stand talking in front of people, let alone being under a spotlight on a stage, elevated. I don't like this. But I care about you, and I think that it's worth doing because you guys are worth my time, my energy, my investment. So that view of myself was a result of losing sight of the one opinion that matters. Who does that? Jacob? Jesus. There you go. So how does God view us? If He created us in His image and wants us to have a relationship with Him, then He certainly values us far more than we will ever remember. In fact, He loves us so much, He gave His Son to die for us. How many of you guys know I just had a son like a year ago? He just turned 1. Like a lot of you guys. Most of you guys have seen him, right? It's pretty cute, right? I can guarantee, as much as I love you guys, I don't know that I would ever be willing to give my son for you.
Fair enough.
When you have kids, you'll understand that to a whole new level. I was like, who knows? But then you have a kid, and you're like, wow. Ryan Reynolds said it best. I'm pretty sure that he said something about he would push Blake Lively in front of a bullet in order to save his kid. Yes. What? But that's what happens. You love your kids so much more than you could ever understand, and God gave His only Son for us. So despite growing up in the church and going to youth groups and doing the church things, I still managed to lose sight of the value God placed on my life. And I lost sight because I stopped looking. How many of you guys can say that deep down you guys have stopped looking? I don't need hands. How many of you guys can say that you've stopped looking to God to see or to find your value, to see what you were worth? Despite finding my way out of the hole that I was in at the time in high school, I found myself back in it a few years later, worse than ever before. After a series of events, I found myself on my knees, and I can picture it to this day. I found myself on my knees in my bedroom with a gun to my head. I can picture exactly where I was on my bedroom floor, what wall I was looking at, everything. And in that moment, I thought, this is it. I'll make the world a better place. I won't be here. That's all I could think. And then somehow, some voice told me, no, what are you doing? You have worth, you have purpose. And tears streaming down my face, gun to my head. In that moment, I felt broken and empty, but I felt the presence of Jesus with me in that room. And I remembered His love for me and the value that He'd already placed on my life before I was ever even thought. From the beginning, He put value on my life, and I remembered that in that moment. John 10:10 says, I, Jesus, have come that they might have life and that they may have it more abundantly. Being in that hole is not what God has for you. That's not what He ever intended. If you find yourself there, the only way to get out of it is through Jesus, is by turning back to him and looking at him and finding your value, finding your worth in him. God is so loving and merciful. A week later, after that moment, on my knees, crying with a gun to my head, about ready to end it all, a week later, I met my wife. Crazy. I almost gave that up. My wife's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And then my kid. I think back to the times when I thought the world would be better without me, and then I think of her. Oh, wow, her life's changed. What about my kid? I think of my son who wouldn't have been born. And you would be able to have him in the nursery. Can you imagine not holding him? How cute he is? Right? I was ready to give that up, and I didn't even know what I was giving up. I think of the guy at work who recently came to the Lord, and now he has a million questions because he didn't grow up in the church, and he comes to me for answers because he thinks that I have it all together. Who would he go to? Who would have gotten him to start going to church if I wasn't at work? If I wasn't around for that? I think about how that next week I was attending a 24-hour sermon. It was a prayer worship, fasting and sermon at a church. And somewhere around 11:30, midnight, I got a phone call. Hey, your brother's been in an accident. We don't know what happened to him. We just know he got taken away in an ambulance. We don't know if he's going to be okay. Were you awake for that when that happened?
I was asleep, but I got woken up at that exact time, and I remember I felt the Holy Spirit say, pray for your brother and his friend, and so I did. And then I woke up the morning up and found out he had gotten in a car accident.
Flipped his car 10 times. His arm is all mangled. A week before, I was going to kill myself. Can you imagine what agony my parents would have been in already, and then having me end up in a car accident? I was at that service, and we had the entire church praying for my brother because I was still there. Nobody at that church would have known. They didn't know my brother. But we were all there to be able to pray for his well-being. I was able to pray with him at the ICU. I was able to stand in the ICU, holding his hand, praying over him while he's laying there, mostly unconscious, blood spewing out of him. Kind of graphic, right? Fractured neck. He's got the neck brace and everything on him. Doctors are coming in and out. Everyone's freaking out. And I just remember being there, holding his hand, because that's the only thing I could do. I could have not been there for that. I cannot stress to you enough how each and every one of you is important. You have value. You are wanted. You are loved. You matter. And not a single one of us would be better off if we were not here. Now, for a lighter example, a little bit more mainstream, right? How many of you guys have seen Moon Knight? Most of you guys. I'll be honest, I still don't 100% understand what the heck happened in that show. So the premise is there's Egyptian gods, goddesses, whatever. One of them basically wants to judge all of humanity based on what they may or may not do in the future, and if it's a bad thing, then they kill them right then and there. And then the other one's like, no, wait until they do something bad and then kill them. Which I guess that's pretty dark now that I think about it.
Yeah, mainstream, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, so the idea is the hero in the show has to stop this from happening. So it begs the question, if we know someone's going to do something that's bad, if we know they're going to sin, why would we continue to allow them to do so before they ever commit it? If we already know what's going to happen. Well, God does that, right? He knows we're all sinful, but He still wanted us. Because we all have value. And the simple answer is, we're all going to commit sins, and we know that. But being judged before doing so is not only unjust, because you can't be judged for something that hasn't occurred. That's not fair. But it will also remove all of the good things you would ever do. Ending my life would have prevented all of the good things I could ever accomplish from ever taking place. That's unjust. That's selfish of me. So another of my favorite examples, Aaliyah's favorite, is Loki. He has a phrase, and he says it a few times, but it's one of my favorites. It's one of my older sister's favorites. And he says, "I am Loki of Asgard, and I'm burdened with glorious purpose." If you ever see him say it in the show, you're like, dude, that gives me chills. That's awesome. I like the statement because it shows that he is sure of who he is and exactly what he's destined for. He knows what his life is meant for. What if we all knew what our lives were meant for? And would we be as committed to it as Loki is? Believe it or not, you have a purpose, and it is glorious, and it may not be flashy, it may not be clear to you now, or as clear as you wish it might be, but God put you here for a reason, and He has a plan for your life. And if any of you struggles with depression or anxiety or feeling worthless or like you're not good enough, I want to encourage you. Joshua 1:9 says, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." So no matter what you enter into, whether it's school or just normal work or your life in general, He's always there for you. Deuteronomy 31:8 says, "And the Lord, He is the one who goes before you." Okay, real quick, let's pause there. The God that created the entire universe, He created you with a purpose, goes before you. If you think you're walking into something and you don't have a clue what you're doing there, the God that made that situation even possible already went there for you. He's already gone. So keep that in mind. He'll be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear and do not be dismayed. The Lord is with you always. He will not leave you. He loves you and He wants a relationship with you. Now, I said before that I lost sight of God because I stopped looking. He never once took His eyes off me, and He never once takes His eyes off of you. So there's a few things that I leave you with. Number one, if you found yourself in a rut, or you have been in one, or more than likely you'll end up in one in the future, because it happens, that's just life. There's a few things you can do to make it easier to get out of them or avoid them altogether. So first would be, if you haven't already, ask God to save you from your sins. Salvation is always the first step. From there, read His Word regularly. I can't remember where I saw it, and I was trying to find the statistics. Couldn't find them for the life of me. But they said, if you read the Bible for at least 4 times a week, just read it. This goes for unbelievers as well. 4 times a week, they found noted, what's the word? We'll go with benefits. Noted benefits to people that had depression. The levels of depression dropped dramatically for people that read the Bible 4 times a week or more. And that doesn't matter if you're a believer or not. Imagine if believers did that. You don't have to raise your hand. How many of you guys are doing that right now? Right? And then pray regularly. You can't have a relationship if you're not in communication with God. I have to remind myself this because I have a phone, I've got email, I've got all kinds of different ways that I can communicate with my wife, but then she sometimes still reminds me, hey, you don't communicate with me. Hey, we need to talk. Like, but I can talk to you whenever. But do you? Right? Praying is easier than texting. You don't even have to pull your phone out. Just boom, there it is. Instant. So we're going to take a moment to do 2 of those things. The altar's open. Jessica, you did? Mm-hmm. The altar's open. Caroline's going to come up. Jessica's going to come up. If you need someone to pray with, don't hesitate to come up. If you don't want to pray with someone and you just want to pray, that's fine too. But we're here for you. If you haven't made a commitment to follow Christ, and you know that you're living a life that's far from Him, take this moment to come back and ask for forgiveness. If you're struggling with something and don't know what to do, I urge you to bring it to the Lord. You don't have to tell anyone in this room. But if anyone can understand, it's him. If you want to bring it to one of us, we're more than happy to pray with you. If you have questions, we are more than happy to help you through them. That's what we're here for. I don't want to see any of you guys suffer the way I have suffered in my life. Jessica will say the same.
Amen.
Dallas will say the same thing if he's here. That is why we are here. We are here to help you, to make it easier on you, so that you can avoid the mistakes we've made. So bring it to one of us. Let us pray over you. Bring